Aircraft carriers are so vital to the U.S. government that a federal law actually dictates the minimum number of operational carriers the U.S. Navy must maintain. That number is 11. But how is this specific figure determined? And why is there such an overwhelming emphasis on these massive floating air bases, rather than on other types of warships, the number of aircraft carriers, the overall size of the U.S. Navy fleet, and indeed the entire U.S. military establishment, all adhere to a deceptively simple formula. This strategy is rooted in the lessons of two major wars, but it's not what you might think. Being the most powerful isn't always the same as being powerful enough. You often hear that the United States boasts the largest and most potent navy in the world, but simply being number one isn't necessarily sufficient. Imagine an MMA champion. They'd be quickly overwhelmed if they faced multiple opponents simultaneously. Similarly, even the most powerful military might struggle to defeat the combined forces of several nations acting in concert. So, the fundamental question remains, how much power is truly enough? The doctrine of power projection. The United States military doctrine is built around power projection. Simply put, power projection is a nation's capacity to deploy and sustain its armed forces far beyond its own borders. To facilitate this global reach, there are currently around 750 U.S. foreign military bases strategically spread across 80 nations worldwide. However, the United States' primary instrument of power projection, especially in regions where permanent land-based facilities are limited, is undeniably the Navy. This is precisely why there's such an immense emphasis on aircraft carriers. Where is the closest aircraft carrier? They say this is the very first question U.S. presidents pose during a crisis. But it's actually the air wing assigned to the aircraft carrier that truly captures the president's interest. The carrier itself is, in essence, just a massive floating airbase. Its primary role is to enable the seamless operation of the powerful air wing it transports. Think of it like bread. It's merely a vehicle for delivering butter. And the true power projection, for which aircraft carriers are renowned, is genuinely delivered by the sophisticated airplanes within the carrier air wing. These aircraft can project tactical air power over vast distances, encompassing critical capabilities like airborne early warning, air interdiction, and anti-surface warfare. In fact, the very law that currently mandates the U.S. Navy to maintain a minimum of 11 aircraft carriers also stipulates a minimum of 9 carrier air wings. The 11 enigma, fighting two wars at once. But how did the U.S. government arrive at the seemingly arbitrary number of 11? The U.S. Navy's 11 supercarriers alone outnumber all other nations' aircraft carriers combined, and that's just in sheer quantity. Beyond simple displacement, every American aircraft carrier is nuclear-powered, granting them virtually unlimited range. However, not all 11 supercarriers are simultaneously deployable. At any given moment, roughly 1/3 are undergoing crucial maintenance and extensive overhauls in shipyards. Another 1/3 are engaged in rigorous training and preparation exercises, and the final 1/3 are actively deployed. Even if circumstances demanded, more carriers could be swiftly readied for deployment. But the total number of instantly deployable supercarriers is considerably less than the nominal 11. In practice, only 2 to 3 supercarriers are typically deployed at any given time, and remarkably, this is considered sufficient. Sufficient to fight 2 major wars in 2 separate regions of the world simultaneously, and to decisively win both. This strategic concept of fighting 2 wars at once dates back to President Lyndon B. Johnson's administration. Under Johnson, the U.S. armed forces were deliberately sized to possess the capability to wage 2 major conflicts concurrently. At one point, even a half-war in the Third World was added to this demanding calculus. When Richard Nixon assumed office in 1969, the formula was adjusted to accommodate fighting 1.5 wars simultaneously. Every president since has somewhat refined this strategy, but the fundamental measure largely remains the ability to engage in 2 geographically separated regions of the world nearly simultaneously. This critical approach is known as the 2 major regional contingency strategy, or the 2 major theater war strategy. the capacity to deter and definitively defeat large-scale cross-border aggression in two distant theaters within overlapping timeframes is paramount for the United States to uphold its status as a global superpower and effectively safeguard its worldwide interests. Historical precedents and evolving threats. The most recent tangible illustration of this two-war strategy in action was the overlapping major conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Iraq War commenced in 2003, leading to the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, with the official withdrawal of U.S. troops completed in 2011. Although the subsequent mismanagement of the power vacuum allowed ISIS to gain prominence in 2014, necessitating renewed U.S. military involvement. The war in Afghanistan had already begun in 2001 and tragically endured for 2 decades. In February 2020, the U.S. and the Taliban formalized an agreement in Qatar, where the Taliban pledged unspecified actions to prevent groups like Al-Qaeda from using Afghan soil to threaten the U.S. and its allies, in exchange for the complete withdrawal of all international forces from Afghanistan. By August 31, 2021, as the world watched with bated breath, U.S. and allied forces hastily departed Kabul, effectively returning the Taliban to control of the country. However, the genesis of this two-war doctrine extends far back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The late 19th century was a period of significant territorial expansion for the United States. In 1898 alone, the U.S. annexed Hawaii, acquired Guam and Puerto Rico, and famously purchased the Philippines from Spain for $20 million. With some of these newly acquired islands situated in the vast Pacific and others in the Atlantic, a robust Navy presence became imperative in both oceans. The completion of the Panama Canal in 1914 facilitated the efficient transit of ships from one side to the other, meaning the U.S. Navy could effectively maintain a presence in both oceans without needing to double its fleet size.